official residence of the Queen in Scotland is the Palace of Holyroodhouse. Translated to mean the House of the Holy Cross, the palace takes its name from the ancient abbey, founded here in 1128. It stands at the bottom of Edinburgh's Royal Mile, against the spectacular backdrop of Arthur's Seat, and is open to visitors throughout the year. The palace is the setting for many state ceremonies and official engagements when the Queen is in residence during Holyrood Week. In September 2010, the Queen received Pope Benedict XVI at the palace, the first ever state visit by a pope to Britain. Holyroodhouse is home to some of Scotland's greatest treasures and is closely associated with its rich history. One of the palace's most famous residents was the ill-fated Mary Stuart, better known as Mary Queen of Scots, who took up residence in 1561. Holyroodhouse was the setting for many of the dramatic episodes in Mary's short and turbulent reign, and visitors can see the room in which Mary witnessed the murder of Italian secretary David Rizzio by her husband, Lord Darnley. Mary's son, James VI of Scotland, would become James I of England too, and he moved the court to London. In 1633, Charles I was crowned King of Scotland at the palace. But the Stuarts' grip on power would end in civil war, and the fortunes of Holyroodhouse seemed unsure. The restoration of the monarchy in 1660 put Charles II on the throne, and Holyroodhouse once again became a royal palace. He wanted Holyroodhouse to impress, and so he went about restoring the palace. On the Great Stair, the spectacular plasterwork ceiling is almost lifelike. And throughout, the palace was decorated with the most fashionable French tapestries, many which can still be seen to this day. In the Great Gallery, the largest room in the palace, portraits of Scottish monarchs reasserted the Stuart succession to the throne. But history was to repeat itself, and by 1715 the Stuarts had lost power. In 1745, a direct Stuart descendant would return. He was known as the Young Pretender. His real name was Prince Charles Edward Stuart, but he would go down in history as Bonnie Prince Charlie. Bonnie Prince Charlie's allies quickly took Edinburgh, and he soon made Holyroodhouse his headquarters. The Young Pretender would have slept here in this magnificent bed. When this bed was commissioned in 1682, it cost the equivalent, in today's money, of £30,000, and 9/10 of that was the fabric. Bonnie Prince Charlie never succeeded in restoring Stuart power to Scotland, and despite the new attention focused on Holyroodhouse, little effort was made to maintain the palace during the 18th century. The palace fell into disrepair. The visit of George IV to Scotland in 1822 marked a turning point in the history of Holyroodhouse as a royal residence. George IV was the first reigning monarch to visit Scotland for over 100 years. Considerable improvements were made to the palace before the King's arrival, and from this point on, the palace became one of the foremost attractions in the Scottish capital. In 1850, Queen Victoria first visited the palace. She continued the restoration started by George IV and had a great deal of affection for Holyroodhouse throughout her reign. Here she can be seen seated in her sitting room, today known as the morning drawing room. For nearly 900 years, the palace has played a central role in Scotland's history and continues to do so as the Queen's official home in Edinburgh and one of the city's most popular tourist attractions. The story of this remarkable building is the story of Scotland.